Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education, and I'm your host, Tim Bogats. One of my all-time favorite quotes is from Andy Warhol, who said, "Art is what you can get away with." Now, for our kids, that is true a lot of the time. They love that feeling of getting away with something or doing something they aren't supposed to be doing. And that's why they love it when they work with clay, or when you go outside to draw, or when you do printmaking, or when you're sculpting using strange materials. They love it all just because it is so different from what they do during their normal school day. Art lets them think that they're actually getting away with something. And a lot of times, the most exciting and most intriguing of those experiences come when there's a little bit of an element of danger involved, when the teacher feels like they're getting away with something. When I was teaching, I was always trying to push the limits of what we were doing, both conceptually with kind of the ideas of our projects, but also in the process and the day-to-day work of art making. For me, it started when I was looking for something to push our figure drawing to the next level. I was looking at an artist named Robert Longo, and he's famous for these huge charcoal or graphite realistic drawings called Men in Cities. And it's these people dressed up, both men and women, in formal wear in these really awkward poses. And so I was starting to think of how we could do that and just researching him a little bit more. And I ran across this interview where Robert Longo talked about how he would get his figure drawing models in front of him, and then he would just start throwing stuff at them, just like start chucking literally baseballs and things like that at them. And so I had the brilliant idea of, oh, hey, I need to start throwing stuff at my students. And I was like, okay, well, let's give this a try. I was a little scared. I was a little nervous because it was kind of dangerous. But kids were super excited about it. We go outside and we just start chucking things at people. And as we're trying to dodge that, then we're taking pictures of them to use in our figure drawings. And lo and behold, if the first time I try this, my principal doesn't drive by to see us throwing things and me just throwing Nerf balls right at my students. And so I'm just thinking, oh man, I am going to get fired. But luckily, he was pretty supportive. I was able to explain what we were doing, and I was able to get away with something dangerous. And from there, we got some great drawings. The kids loved doing this. They came up with some great results. And, you know, me taking that risk, me doing something dangerous, led to some really, really interesting stuff. And it worked out really, really well for me. And so I'm just going to tell you, don't be afraid to kind of step into something that may be a little outside your comfort zone, something that may be a little bit dangerous, because what that goes to show you is that risk taking really can pay off. And so doing some things that, like I said, may be a little bit dangerous, those projects, if you do them right, can really lead to a lot of benefits, not only for you, but for your students as well. And so I'm going to bring on Andrew right now too, and talk to him about a few dangerous things that he does, some other dangerous work that has kind of gone up on the AOE site recently, and sort of talk about managing all of those things and how to turn these dangerous projects into good experiences for our kids. So let's bring on Andrew right now. And now to join me, my favorite dangerous art teacher, Mr. Andrew McCormick. How are you?
I'm good. I want that like as an iron-on badge, though, like on a jacket. My most favorite dangerous art teacher. That's awesome. Thank you.
I like it. It can be your bad boy reputation.
Yeah, there we go.
Now, before we get started, I want to do a quick shout out to Luke Nielsen, who was kind of the inspiration for this episode. He's been doing a bunch of videos on AOE, and one of his most popular ones was all about painting with fire, and he does some really, really cool things. So I'm going to recommend that you all check those out. But Andrew, I need to ask you, because I know you love fire in general, and especially blowtorches. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about some of the things you do in your classroom that may or may not run the risk of burning your school to the ground?
Yeah, totally. I've never been worried about burning the building down. I've always been a little bit worried about setting off the fire alarms. But yeah, I love blowtorches. They are way fun, and I don't know, maybe it's even just the name. But when you tell the kids, like, "All right, we're gonna get out the blowtorches for this," they're like, "Oh man, it is on!" Like they're super excited. Like, yeah, blowtorches. They don't realize that like they can just go to Walmart and buy like a little propane torch. Like to them, they hear blow torches and they think it's like super dangerous. But yeah, I mean, I've done. I had a sculpture class where we had a bunch of stuff just kind of laying around, and I was trying to come up with ideas for projects to come up with, and with these really big giant styrofoam blocks. And I was like, that'd be fun to do kind of a reductive carving. And I had a couple of the like electrical hot knives, and we were kind of cutting through them. And I was talking one day about kind of the science of polystyrene and what happens. I said, if you accidentally, put some hairspray on polystyrene, it'll melt a little bit and kind of dissolve, and you can't really control it. And it looks really cool. And like, oh, let's see. It's like, okay, all right, I told you it does it, so I better show it to you. And then it's like, if you take a blowtorch to it a little bit, it'll start to kind of melt right before your eyes, but not totally burn up. Like, oh, that sounds awesome. So I showed it to him, and then the whole rest of that semester, that class should have just been renamed Fun with Fire, because everything that they could find an excuse like, hey, can we use the blowtorches for this? It's like, okay, sure. So, I've done melted styrofoam. I've done like shaped plastic, where you take like plastic spoons and kind of bend them into shape and fuse them together. There's been some projects where we've melted PVC pipes and kind of bent them into place. And every year, every semester, I always have students who want to make like a drawing look old. So they'll say, can we burn the edges? And it's like, of course we can. And I've never been too worried about blowtorches. Never once had an accident or anything with them, or even anything remotely scary or dangerous. But, my saving grace has been that I had a door that led right out to a courtyard, right connected to my room. Awesome. Yeah, and it was just like, let's quick head outside, and then we don't have any issues with fumes. We've got proper ventilation. And it was a big glass door, so I could actually be outside and watch kids with blowtorches and still see my kids inside, or vice versa. So I was able to kind of watch both groups of kids and make sure that everyone was being safe, even though we were using blowtorches.
The other, I guess, big safety issue, the one that kind of always used to deal me fits, is just dealing with those sharp things like linoleum carving tools, X-Acto knives, even the paper cutter. Like, what do you do with those sort of issues, and kind of where do you draw the line with things that kids should and shouldn't be using?
Well, I never let kids use a paper cutter, and not because I think it's that dangerous, although I've heard some horror stories from students or from teachers, and, their first year of teaching, they'd let a kid use it, and, they'd chop a bit of a thumb off or something. Yeah, it's like, oh my God.
You're making all of our listeners cringe right now.
Well, I'm sorry. I just heard that a couple days ago from someone, and I was just like, oh my God. And I don't let kids use the paper cutter because I don't trust their cutting abilities. It's like, hey, I want you to cut this in half and make it be 11 by 18. And it just comes back horrible, like crooked. Yeah. So I don't let them use it just because I don't trust their cutting abilities. But in talking about linoleum blades and X-Acto knives, I just teach them up. I coach the kids up, and we do a little bit more front loading at the beginning of the project. And I say, if you do this wrong, you will jab this into your hand and you will be bleeding in my classroom. You will be in pain. And I say it not to scare them, but I just say, there's a wrong and a right way to use these tools. And if I see you doing it the wrong way, I'm going to let you know about it. And I'm going to kind of, chew you out a little bit, because I care about your safety. And then once those projects are rolling, and I've really coached them up at the beginning, I mean, I'm like a hawk. I'm on the prowl. I'm looking for kids doing all sorts of dumb and dangerous things with those tools, and then I'm going to correct that behavior. And, for 12 years of teaching, I've only had, one pretty significant injury where a kid just really did jabbed it right into the side of his hand. But other than that, I mean, every year I have one or two kid who they'll say, "Oh, Ms. McCormick, I cut myself," and they're so worried that I'm going to be disappointed in them. And I look at it, and it's like, that's a paper cut. Like you touched the tip of your linoleum cutter and like you didn't even like pierce the skin, like you're fine. But I did have one kid who did jab it in pretty good, and I hate to say this, but he was fine. He didn't ever even get stitches, but we took him to the nurse, and I use it as a teaching moment. I didn't want to make the kid feel bad, but I looked at everyone else. I'm like, so you see, like there's a reason why exactly. I tell you guys, you cut away from your hand, and you never cut towards your hand, because this is what can happen when it hops out of its groove and you're not paying attention. So,
yep. And we actually just talked about, I'm teaching the AOE printmaking course right now, the studio printmaking, and we were just talking about that. And I shared with them, my key was always saying that just the phrase hand behind, because you hold with one hand, you carve with the other hand, and the hand that you're holding the linoleum with goes behind. And so I just constantly walk around, and every time you catch a kid, just remind guys, hand behind, hand behind. And just that simple phrase seemed to cut down on accidents so much. But it is really, like you said, about sort of that pre-teaching or even scaffolding that knowledge on how to use the tools, and then just a matter of supervision. And I think that's cool. And if I can sort of direct this to a little bit younger grades as well, what do you think about like linoleum carving tools or X-Acto knives or things like that at the elementary level? Like, do you think 5th and 6th graders can handle those sorts of things?
Well, that one's a little more tougher. I mean, I don't know if I can throw out a blanket statement because it's been a while since I've taught elementary school, but I did do it for 4 years. And, I'd have kids in 4th grade do a little bit, but only if I felt like I could confidently trust that group and it was a small project and I could really supervise them well. So I think that it's going to probably rely on each teacher and how comfortable they feel with their students and in their knowledge of the process and watching it and coaching it up. There's a big difference if you have a group of 5th graders and there's 20 of them versus a group of 5th graders and there's 34 of them. Right. It's a whole lot easier to watch and make sure everyone's safe when there's a smaller group. Some of this, and this is kind of a insidious thing to say, but I mean, it also depends on how comfortable you feel in your job. I mean, I've always felt really, really supported that even if a kid does, accidentally cut their finger on the linoleum cutter because they weren't paying attention, my administration supports me and knows that I'm doing a good job and I'm doing my best to teach safety and teach skills. And there's some teachers out there who, they sneeze funny at a PD and they're written up by their administrators. Those people understandably might play it a little safer, a little closer to the vest. So I think it probably depends. But, on the flip side of that, in saying like, no way, no how, no 6th grader should ever have a sharp tool. Yeah. The consequence of that is you have 9th graders, which I currently have, who not only have never used an X-Acto knife, but didn't even know what one was. They were like, what is this thing? Right. Yeah. Like, oh my God. And my go-to sort of like sarcastic insult of them is like, how are you ever going to survive the zombie apocalypse if you don't know how to use an X-Acto knife? And they just kind of stare at me with this like dumb look on their face. I'm like, you have to, come on, you need to have some skills. You need to know how to like make stuff and be self-sufficient. And then I say, what separates us from lesser primates is our ability to use tools. Come on. Got to be able to use an X-Acto knife, man.
Yeah, I like that. And so let's dive into that just a little bit, actually. You talk about kids not having the experience with that and some of the kind of consequences of not having that experience. But when you are teaching, letting kids use different tools, whether that be saws or screwdrivers or X-Acto knives or linoleum tools, like what are some of the benefits that you see to allowing your kids to use something that maybe you don't know if they're ready for. And do you think that kind of those benefits and what they'll learn outweigh kind of the drawbacks or the risks that come along with that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I use a ton of power tools, like, drills, jigsaws. Those are the main ones. I've used an angle grinder with students before, like cutting through, steel rods. And I always love seeing these students, and especially usually it's like the more sort of like demure, sort of shy students who I'm like, all right, we're gonna cut through this piece of wood with this jigsaw. And they're like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. And it's like, no, yes, you are. I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to watch you do it a couple times and you're going to feel confident. And when they grab that saw and they cut through something, they're like, I did it. I did it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like a proud, like, parent or teacher moment. You're like, see, there was nothing to be afraid of with this thing. Now, I always tell kids that they need to have a healthy respect for tools, because some of the tools that we use, they're no joke. You could actually hurt yourself with them, but you have to respect them, but you should never be afraid of a tool. And again, it goes to like coaching them up and watching them and kind of scaffolding that I'm going to show you, then I'm going to do it, then I'm going to let you do it while I watch you. And then eventually, once I know I've seen you do it a couple times, I'm going to trust that you can do this on your own and be safe. I mean, it's what IT instructors have been doing forever. They teach the skill, they trust the kids to do it, and then they let them do it on their own.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And yeah, I think the confidence building is a huge part of that. But let me see how I want to phrase this. When you are letting kids do so many things and you're trying so many new, exciting, and sometimes dangerous things, has there ever been any times where you feel like you've taken on like too much of a risk, like when you've been a little too dangerous with what you're doing? And if it has, like, how do you handle that, or how do you kind of walk that back a little bit?
I can't say I've ever had an entire class where I'm looking out, across the class, or a project that I'm doing in multiple sections where I've said, oh my gosh, I've bit off way more than I can chew. But every once in a while, I will catch a group of students, because usually when I do these big sort of STEAM projects where there's tools and there's stuff like that, usually they're kind of working in groups. And I'll just see a group who's kind of bitten off more than they can handle. And I'll say, I'm going to intervene here and help out with this group, because I don't know what you're doing that I feel safe letting you guys do this and explore. And that's usually the group of kids who, on the flip side of the shy student, is very cavalier. And I've grown up doing, I fix cars with my dad. I know everything. It's like, you're being a little bit too much bravado over here.
Yeah.
So specifically, I'm thinking of a group who we were doing this sort of mini arcade Steam project, and they had taken apart an old record player and they wanted to be able to slow it down with like a dimmer switch. So, I'm kind of working with them a little bit. I'm like, okay, if you strip this wire and strip this wire and plug it all together, now we have a switch, and this is how electrons work, and this is how the circuit works. And then when the moment came to actually like plug it in and then like flip the switch, I kind of had this voice in the back of my head. I was like, if this blows up or like, electrocutes someone, you might want to be the one that's doing it. So I was the one who held the switch. And there's been a couple moments like that where it's like, okay, I'm going to help you cut this, because I don't think it's like the safest thing. But there's only been a couple moments of that. One of my mantras when it comes to safety that's really been helpful and good is, if you can do it with a hand tool, why would you do it with a power tool? So if you can do it with a handheld hacksaw and cut this little piece of wood, you don't need to bust out the giant Sawzall reciprocating saw. Like, that's just overkill, So we do a lot of handheld, handheld saws, some drills, but a lot of handheld tools is kind of where we start. And then on a person by person or group by group basis, we get into like the more heavy duty stuff.
Yeah. And I think that's a really, really good approach. And one last question here. Let's kind of wrap this up. I think, a lot of these issues with, dangerous tools, dangerous projects, et cetera, come back to a couple things. Number one, you got to kind of scaffold kids' learning so they're comfortable with the tools, they're comfortable with the process, and that's going to make it a lot less dangerous. And obviously, you need a lot of good supervision, and that's on the teacher. So, but both of those things are eminently doable. Like, every teacher can do that. So I guess my question for you to kind of wrap things up, for teachers that are kind of on the fence, like they have an exciting project they want to try, or they have something that maybe feels a little bit risky, and they're kind of on the fence about it. Like, what advice would you give them? Do you think they should jump in, make sure they're doing it right? Or would you just sort of ease in as you feel comfortable? Like, what advice would you give them?
Well, for me personally, I always just jumped in, and I felt like it was just always easier to, beg for forgiveness and plead ignorance that, oh, I didn't realize, this was going to be a problem or you were offended. But I also had a very, very supportive environment. So I knew that my administrators and my fellow teachers kind of saw the merit in what I was doing with these sort of, heavy power tool usage, STEAM type, weird sculpture projects that, I knew I was supported. And if I were in an environment where I felt less supported, I might be a little bit more cautious. I might kind of run over some things first with my administrators and say, okay, we're going to be doing this. We're going to be doing that. Maybe seek guidance from, like I said, the industrial tech teachers and see, what is the best way to have a couple different students working with, a jigsaw or a drill. But I wouldn't let your own fears, completely stop you. I think at worst, you maybe just play it a little safer and, maybe ask a little bit permission first. But if you're feeling like you can just go for it, then I would just go for it.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And I think that's a good point for us to go out. So, Andrew, thank you for joining me. And as always, it's been a pleasure.
Hey, my pleasure, man. Stay dangerous, my friends.
Right.
I think I can probably borrow that tagline, right?
Yeah, I think that's good. All right. We'll talk to you later.
All right, cool.
All right. A big thank you to my favorite dangerous art teacher, Andrew McCormick. And as always, an awesome interview with him. Now, before we close up shop, though, I want to tell everybody about something that I think you're probably going to be interested in. It's the Art Ed Now Winter Online Conference. Now, a lot of our listeners have done AOE's online conference before, but for those of you that haven't, it is flat out amazing. It's a full day of presentations specifically made for art teachers. It's inspiring, it's innovative, and if you're looking for new ideas, kind of like we're talking about today, exploring new things, it's the place to go. You can go to artednow.com to see everything about the conference, and you have about 3 weeks left to sign up at the early bird price of $99. There are presentations already announced about sculpting with drywall, working with graffiti, taking your kids outside to paint, all of those new and exciting things that are going to help your kids develop the skills and the confidence that, we've talked about throughout this entire episode. And there's still over a dozen presentations that are still to be announced. So again, go to artednow.com and check out everything about the Winter Online Conference. I really think it's something that's worth your time. But just a few quick thoughts to kind of close things out. I want everybody who listened to this to think about a couple questions. Okay. What do you do in your classroom that inspires risk taking? Or what do you do that inspires adventure? Because you don't need to be scared away from things that seem dangerous. Now, you need to be aware of the issues, all the safety that goes with it, and all the things that you do to make those type of projects run smooth, and so do your kids, but it's all doable. And as Andrew and I talked about, it's about scaffolding that knowledge, helping kids develop the skills they need, and working with them throughout the entire process. Because as you do those dangerous things, kids are participating in new, exciting experiences. They're strengthening skills that they may not even know they had. They're building confidence. They're taking chances. They're working outside the comfort zone. All of those things that everyone wants kids to do and that art teachers do so well. So don't be afraid to take the chance on a dangerous project. If you teach it right and you supervise it correctly, the benefits for both you and your kids can be immeasurable. In fact, you may come to find out that doing something dangerous might be the best decision you've ever made. Art Ed Radio is developed, produced, and supported by the Art of Education with audio engineering by Michael Crocker. You can see more from the podcast on artedradio.com, where you can also sign up for the weekly Art Ed Radio email. And speaking of those emails, we have been getting a lot lately, and we appreciate it. Email Andrew and me at radioguys@theartofed.com. We appreciate critiques or concerns or any kind of conversation. Feel free to shoot us a note today that shares the most dangerous thing that you've ever done in your classroom, because I feel like that could be an interesting discussion to get started. So our next episode, though, will be out on Tuesday, and as we always say, thank you for listening.